Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one we're going to do our next episode of the October Nightmare, and this is a little diorama I've made, and I've called it the Father of Silence. So this is another one of those grim dark miniatures. It's got a lot of character. It comes with the little cathedral steps that are all destroyed behind it. I've just mounted it onto a large wooden coaster, mixed in some sand with PVA and put some texture around the bottom. And then I've got these lovely little prints of skulls, put a few of them around, and we're going to go from there. So I want this to look like very 40k Warhammery, so really bright colours that we're going to dull down and grim dark up. So starting off with the red on the main part of the actual sort of hooded cowl and the cape itself. And as we go on through the video, you'll see more of the details coming out. Like for example, his face is brilliant, so it's like it's hidden behind all these hands that are coming up through the robe, and if they're covering his mouth. And as you can see, not been too neat with that initial layer, and that's fine because now we'll add in all the other colours. We're going to start to neaten up the actual image. So with an ivory, going to be working on all the skin tones, the scroll work, and a couple of little details on the actual miniature itself, which getting this nice base coating, cleaning up any areas where I might have accidentally spilt the red, things like that. And then when we get to once all the base colours are on and we get to that wash, that'll unify everything. You'll see it really makes the scrolls in particular pop, because there's printed within the miniature of these little details, these little sort of scriptures and symbols, and they'll come out and shine once that initial sort of wash layers down. But at this point it's just a case of just getting the base colours on, and as I say, that unifying brown wash is going to get everything coming all together and making it looking all gritty and dark. And for this step I wanted just a little bit of colour, because we're going to have some gold accents later on some of the jewellery and finery that's on the miniature, but just to break up that red and the scroll work. So I've gone for this really dark greyish blue Pro Acryl, and the coverage is absolutely beautiful on this. It's come out really nice, and it just gives a bit of colour for a bit of accent work. And considering with the model he's only got these shoulder pads that go around and this sort of middle part of the robe that goes down his back, which you'll see later on, it just gives a little bit of punch of colour that it needed, because the red's going to actually be very, very like dulled down and sombre as we get into the actual painting process. So this is my favourite part of when I'm doing anything sort of grim dark, is getting this unifying wash on. Now this is a mixture of Seraphim Sepia and a brown ink that I keep in a special pot. Something I've worked on over the years, trying to come up with a good consistency, but this really does, it dyes everything, it puts a nice shade on top of everything, and it's a really nice gritty colour. If you look at the artwork of like John Blanche, who's the sort of grandfather of the grimdark aesthetic, there's this sort of sepia overtone in all of his artwork, and this is the rough idea behind this, was to get something that unifies, gets into all the crevices, brings out all the detail, and then we go back in with the base colours and just lift it up again, but you've still got that sort of brown running throughout the whole piece. Right, so while that brown wash is drying, it's time for the actual groundwork. So the skulls have just had a simple ivory base coat because these are going to get washed down as well. But for the actual ground, something I've been experimenting with, so for the dirty down rust paints, if you actually don't shake them up, because it will eventually, the sediment will settle, and that's from what I understand, that's the thing that makes it react and turn rusty and look like rust. But you get this really nice deep brown, almost like a wash, that really makes things look like, you know, disgusting mud, and it has a bit of a wet quality to it when it dries. It looks a little bit glossy. It's just something I've been experimenting with, and I really like the effect it comes out with. And like with, because it's the dirty down rust and the pigment strength, if you go back over and blob onto certain areas, again without shaking the bottle, because we don't want it to dry like rust, but go back in certain areas and you'll actually get this darker shades of mud and things and grime, and it comes up really nice, especially on the base, and it makes this look like almost like a disgusting sort of swampland where these ruins of this old cathedral or monastery are, where this character resides. And same thing with the dirty down moss as well. You get some really nice shades of green, and you'll see in this there's a couple of blobs of that I'll just put on just to break up the brown. And again, if you feel like you've gone too strong because it's water based, you can go in with a wet brush and brush it back and get back to that original layer a bit more if you feel like you have gone in too heavy. Now in a moment you're going to see me applying that moss paint just in a few blobs. Now you know, go in and practice with this stuff. If you make a mistake, you can bring it back, it's not a problem. You can see there on one of the piles of skulls I've toyed with the idea of I was going to do like green glowing skulls, some sort of basic OSL, and I thought no, it takes away from the grim dark sort of that really nasty gory aesthetic. But you can see here with the moss paint, I'm just a few blobs strategically around, and it just breaks up that brown. And you can see there the base, it's starting to look really gnarly, and again going for that sort of gothic aesthetic. Now at this point the brown wash on the miniatures actually dried, so now it's a case of going back in with the original base colours and just picking out the highlighted areas, and then we'll do a final highlight of a slightly lighter version of that colour. And you see I'm just going around with the blue to start with, just picking out all that sort of shoal and his shoulder pads that the character's wearing, and same again in a second when we did the other colours. But it just makes the colours pop. You've still got that brown unifying wash that gives everything that gritty sort of feel, and it just makes it look a bit more impressive. And exactly the same process now with the red. Reds, I just love painting with this colour. It always comes through really nice. You can get a lot of variations to it. It mixes well with other colours. It's just a brilliant one. It's a good one if you're still practicing techniques. Use red. You can't go wrong. Red and green for me are just two great colours that always do well. And again, like the blue, you can see I'm just going on to the highest areas. I'm leaving the recesses where the wash has gone in, and it's just picking out those details and making that cloak pop, because this is the main colour of the actual piece. Now for the skin, face, and those hands that are creeping up from underneath the hood. So going back to the ivory, just plotting out all the actual colours and the shapes, because the things like the pronunciation and the gaps between the fingers and things like that, the eyebrows and whatnot, picking out those details. And then this will have a little drop of actual white put in to do a very, very extreme highlight. I've always liked the idea of, it's something I've started doing with some of my other miniatures for games that I play, especially if it's like 40k or Warhammer themed and that grimdark, is you've got these nice vibrant colours that are gritty and dulled down, but the fact that the skin is all pallid and white, like it's starved to sun or it's in a poisonous, noxious atmosphere, and it just makes them pop a little bit more. And it's and white's just another fun colour to paint with. You can do a lot with it if you go from looking off grey right the way up and have white. The pure white is your highest highlight. You can make things really, really pop. Now for the metallics, I wanted again these to be dulled down again. Nothing too bright. I don't want it too fancy. So this is a mixture of Balthazar Gold and Retribution Armour from Citadel. Mixture metallics, you can have a lot of fun with these, a lot of experimentation. And then once that base coat's on and it's dry, I go in with the actual gold colour again, just on the highest points. Gives it a bit of shine, but it's nothing. I don't want it too bright and too this thing's got a lot of money and a lot of status. This is something that's living in this swamp, and doing these horrific things, which you'll see in a moment when we get to the end of the video and you get to hear the story. In the heart of a swamp enshrouded by a relentless mist stood the ruins of St. Jude's, an old church swallowed by time and neglect. Its crumbling walls, once a sanctuary for the weary, now leaned precariously under the weight of decay. The place was said to be haunted, but only a few knew the true terror that lay within its dark corners. At the centre of this disarray was Father Malachi, a reclusive priest who had forsaken society to dwell among the shadows. His long, tattered red robes flowed like spectral smoke, and his grey eyes held a depth that spoke of despair and obsession. Whispers of his eerie presence drifted through the nearby village, turning into warnings. A strange man buried in his work, they said, a man who beckoned the lost souls of the swamp to him. What Father Malachi desired was not their physical forms, but their essence, the very souls that flickered like candle flames in their chests. He believed that each soul carried a unique note, a melody woven into the fabric of existence. In his twisted mind he sought to create a choir of silent souls, a haunting harmony that could resonate through the swamp for eternity. It began with Jonathan, a young man with dreams too big for the small village, and he sought adventure but only found peril. Unease settled in the hearts of his friends when he didn't return after a night of exploration in the swamps. With fear gnawing at them, they organised a search. They wandered the terrain breathless and frantic, until they stumbled upon the crumbling edifice of St. Jude's. As they approached the church, an unnatural quiet enveloped them. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, a faint whisper of blood. Inside, the remnants of the altar candles flickered obediently, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. Jonathan, they called, but their voices seemed to evaporate in the stillness. It was then they heard it, a sound like a distant choir echoing through the arches. It was soft but insistent, a melody looping endlessly, taking form and fading like a dream at dawn. Driven by a mix of dread and curiosity, they ventured deeper into the ruins. The sound grew louder, more distinct, pushing them forward until they found themselves staring at Father Malachi, who stood before a makeshift altar. Surrounded by twisted candles that burned with an unholy light, and a series of figures loomed behind him, shadows with no discernible features, flickering like old film frames caught in a projector's beam. His robe seemed to move with some sort of strange force, crawling up from the belly to his mouth, and there they saw a series of small hands, childlike, gripping around his mouth and pulling at his skin. Though his mouth was covered, his voice seemed to echo from inside the actual ruins itself. "Welcome, my children. Join us in a choir of silence. The souls here share their stories, and together they create a silence that speaks louder than any voice." His words wrapped around them, chilling their bones. They saw the vacant gaze of the faces behind him, souls captured in melodious harmony. Jonathan was among them, his face a mask of horror and sorrow, while ghostly echoes of the others shimmered on the edge of their sight, their songs lost within Malachi's grand design. Father Malachi raised his arms, a manic look on his face as he absorbed their collective despair, their fear, their very souls. The bullet of realization struck the air like thunder. The village was not safe, nor was the swamp. They too would fall into the silent choir, lost in the melancholic notes beckoning from St. Jude's. Father Malachi's laughter mingled with the wind, and it was a sound that would forever haunt the ears of those left behind. a lamentation wrapped reverberating echoes where the silence of the lost souls sang eternally.